Thanksgiving dinner. My daughter-in-law slid a card across the table with a smile that cut like glass. Everyone cheered for the family trip she'd planned, 10 days in Cabo, while my card read, house-sitting duties. Deep clean. Thank you for your service. I froze. I am Elaine Whitaker, 65 years old, the woman who raised her husband in this very house after my own husband died, and in front of my son, my grandchildren, and the rest of the family, she reduced me to a maid. No one defended me. Not even Nate, the boy I sacrificed everything for. That moment shattered something inside me. It wasn't just humiliation, it was years of quiet erasure made public, and it was the spark that pushed me to finally take back what was mine. Bryn waited until the turkey was carved and the wine had warmed everyone's cheeks. Then she stood, red dress catching every eye, hair yanked into a perfect bun, and tapped her spoon to a crystal glass like she was calling a board meeting. "I have something special," she said, smiling at all of us, just not at me. "A 10-day family trip. Cabo. We leave in the morning." Applause broke out like a reflex. The kid squealed. Her smile widened as she reached into her clutch, produced a neat stack of cards, and passed them around the table like favors. Mine slid across the linen, stopping in front of my plate. The words were printed in a lovely serif that would have looked elegant on a wedding invitation. House-sitting duties. Deep clean all rooms. Deadline, December 5th. Thank you for your service. It took a beat for the meaning to land, and when it did, it landed hard. Conversation thinned to a buzz. Nate stared at his plate. Fork clenched between his fingers the way he used to grip a pencil when he was scared of getting an answer wrong. Someone cleared a throat. No one said a word for me. "Of course," I heard myself say. Too bright, too quick. My voice didn't sound like it belonged to my body. Bryn nodded, satisfied, and raised her glass. "To family," she said. Crystal chimed, mine stayed on the table. I cut a slice of turkey I couldn't taste and felt something, small but final, crack inside. Not because of a chore list, because the message was clear. You are useful, not included. You keep the lights on and the floors shining while the real family makes memories without you. The humiliation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was tidy, curated, done with a smile and a flourish. The rest of dinner moved on in practiced rhythms, pie, coffee, plate scraped clean, while the card sat beside my knife like a verdict. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I gathered dishes, rinsed them under hot water until my hands stung, and listened to the house breathe around me the way it always had. When the door finally closed behind them that night and quiet settled like snow, I set the card on the counter and smoothed its edges flat. "Thank you for your service," it read. I turned off the kitchen light and stared down the hallway toward the old file cabinet. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to start paying attention. They pulled out before sunrise, exhaust curling in the cold, the SUV shrinking down the block until the taillights disappeared. 50, ma? A sharp knock at my door, and Bryn's voice through the wood, brisk, chirpy. Checklists on the fridge. When I came into the kitchen, there it was. 3 typed pages, bullet points like marching orders, wipe baseboards, reorganize closets, shampoo area rugs, rotate mattresses, and, in a flourish of condescension, Polish golf clubs. I set a magnet over the top corner and let the pages hang, heavy as wet laundry. Silence settled. The second the house closed around me, no kids, no chatter, no performative sweetness, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the dining room clock. I made coffee I didn't drink and walked the hallway that still carried the echo of many Thanksgivings, the kind where gratitude didn't need applause. The card from last night lay on the counter where I'd left it, the same pretty font thanking me for my service. I flipped it face down and opened the old file cabinet. The folders were a map of a life: tax returns, appliance warranties, the deed in a plastic sleeve, insurance policies updated every few years like clockwork. I pulled the homeowner's policy, expecting relief in the familiar language. Instead, a letter fluttered out. Cancellation notice effective 6 weeks ago. Per your request. My stomach went cold. I hadn't requested anything. I read it twice, then a third time, hunting for a misunderstanding that wasn't there. I dialed the insurer and waded through a maze of automated options until a human voice came on. "Yes," she said, polite and certain. "We received a cancellation email from you at Elaine W. Insure I Proton Mail." "I don't have a Proton Mail account. I don't have any account by that name." I asked her to read the message back. She summarized it crisply, confirming my full name, address, policy number, and a request to terminate coverage immediately. The tone was efficient, almost professional. It wasn't mine. When I hung up, the house felt different, like a stranger had walked through it while I slept and turned off lights I didn't remember leaving on. Insurance isn't just paperwork. It's the net beneath the high wire. The thing you forget until the wind picks up. Without it, one burst pipe, one stray spark, one malicious rumor becomes a catastrophe. The cancellation wasn't random. It was a lever. One that clears the way to argue I can't manage what I own, that someone else should step in for my safety. I took pictures of the notice, scanned the policy, saved everything to a thumb drive, and slid the original papers back into their sleeves. The checklist on the fridge fluttered when the heater kicked on. I stared at the lines about baseboards and closets, and I saw what they really were, not chores, but choreography. Keep her busy. Keep her tired. Keep her out of the room where the real damage is being done. I turned off the coffee maker and left the mug in the sink. If they wanted me scrubbing baseboards, I would do the opposite. I would look up, not down. I would read every line they didn't want me to read. I started with the closets. Bryn had turned Nate's childhood room into a dressing space. Her phrase, walls painted a careful grayish, a mirror that could see your pores from 5 feet away, rows of handbags displayed like museum pieces. I opened the built-in and found a shoebox tucked behind a stack of hat boxes. Receipts, folded and clipped. One header kept repeating, Northland Mortgage Services, LLC. I blinked as if that would change the letters. It didn't. The house has been paid off for 14 years. I remember the day the final check cleared, how we ate takeout on the living room floor to celebrate, how the walls felt like they exhaled. There hasn't been a mortgage since. I unfolded the top receipt, monthly payment amounts, dates, a line item, auto pay confirmed. The figure matched the going rate for a modest loan, not outrageous, just consistent enough to disappear into a budget if you weren't looking closely. I looked closely. My phone buzzed with an old thread, our family group text, the kind that carries pictures of school plays and birthday cakes. Weeks ago, Nate had tried to send Bryn a screenshot of his monthly expenses. He'd sent it to all of us by mistake and followed with, "Oops, ignore." I hadn't thought about it. Now I scrolled back until I found the image and zoomed in. There it was, mid-column, ordinary as a light bill, Northland Mortgage Services, LLC, auto pay, posted. I said the name out loud, testing the weight of each word. Northland, mortgage, services, LLC. It sounded like a company a banker would know. But I've lived here long enough to recognize the banks that write loans in this city, and this wasn't one of them. I jotted the name on a sticky note and felt the air thicken. A shell company doesn't need a storefront or a sign. It needs a bank account and a story. The story here was neat. A mortgage on a house that doesn't have one, paid faithfully by a husband who trusts the person handling the bills. The money siphoned into a place where a different story can be written later. I thumbed through more receipts, same header, different dates, each proof of a transaction that shouldn't exist. In the mirror? My expression hardened into something I recognized from older photographs. The look you get when you're done being polite. The Thanksgiving card wasn't a one-off cruelty. It was a performance to cover the real work, move me out of the circle. Call it kindness. And in the silence that follows, build a mechanism to take what's left. I slipped the receipts back where I found them and closed the closet gently. Down the hall. The clock ticked toward noon. The checklist waited on the fridge. Bullet point still bossy. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the trash. If there was a company taking money that didn't belong to it, I would find it. If there was a person behind that company, I already knew her name. The plan to make me small had just made me sharp, and the house, quiet as it was, felt like it had chosen a side. I opened the smart home app with the same care you use to handle broken glass. Bryn had insisted on these upgrades. Modern convenience, she called it, and now the dashboard lit up like a confession. In the smart lock log, a timestamp glowed. 11:58 p. Ma'am, the night before Thanksgiving. Entry granted with my code. My heart kicked once, hard. I scrolled to the doorbell camera. The feed buffered, then the still frame sharpened into the front walk under a cold wash of porch light. At 11:43 p.m., there she was, Bryn, head down, mouth set, hauling a banker's box against her ribs. She glanced up, as if the lens were a mirror, then hurried off screen. I replayed it twice, 3 times. The seconds clacking past like nails in a board. I went straight to the file cabinet. The top drawer held exactly what it always had, until it didn't. Gaps where folders should be. A manila sleeve misfiled, heavy as a stone in my hand. Inside lay a power of attorney. My name, my address, my birth date. A signature that was supposed to be mine, but the lines wobbled like someone tracing from memory. The witnesses' names were typed neatly at the bottom. I knew both. One was Bryn's closest friend, the one who'd taken a notary course last year and, the last I'd heard, had her commission suspended. The other was Sarah, the nanny currently splashing in Cabo with my grandchildren. Heat bloomed up my neck. A forged POA isn't a misunderstanding, it's a loaded gun. With that paper, someone who isn't you can speak as you. They can open a line of credit against your house. They can restructure what you've spent a lifetime building. They can swaddle it all in nice words. Streamlining, asset management, safety. And by the time you realize what's gone, it's titled to someone else. I sat down on the edge of the bed, holding the document flat to keep my hands from shaking. This house has lived 43 years with me. Piano recitals, fevers at 2 a.m., a quiet hospice bed when there were no more breaths to count. And now my name was a costume someone else was trying on, rehearsing lines they planned to deliver as if they'd earned them. The camera had shown me the box. The lock log had shown me the code. The paper showed me the plan. I slid the POA into a zip bag, labeled it in black marker, and put it in my tote. The card on the counter last night had been a performance, a humiliation with good typography. This was the engine behind it. If they could make me the help, they could make themselves the owners, not with a fight, but with a form. I turned off the smart home app and, for the first time since it had been installed, felt safer without it. Covington didn't waste time with small talk. He skimmed the copies I'd made, eyes narrowing at the doorbell stills, the lock logs, the shaky signature. "Lane," he said finally, voice low and even. This isn't just rudeness. This is attempted elder fraud. He pulled a legal pad toward him and began to move. First, we execute an affidavit repudiating any recent POA. Today, we'll courier it to the recorder's office. Second, I'll get a temporary reinstatement on your homeowner's insurance. Call it a lapse due to unauthorized communication. Third, you remove the smart locks, replace them with mechanical deadbolts. No remote codes, no apps. If someone wants in, they have to use a key you control. He turned his monitor to face me. And you should see this. On the screen sat a printed email chain. At the top, Bryn's name and address to a local mortgage broker, waiting on the POA to close a $200K HELOC, should be ready to move soon. The date stamp was last week. Something in my chest went slack, then tight. A HELOC. Not a maybe, an amount. A plan. Paperwork already in orbit, just waiting for a forged signature to pull it into my gravity and smash it against my roofline. As if on cue, Covington's assistant walked in with a letter that had arrived by courier. He slid it across the desk. The header read, Homeowners Association. The tone was prim, concerned. Reports indicate resident Elaine Whitaker exhibits signs of diminished capacity, is disruptive to community order, and may require guardianship for her safety. I didn't need a watermark to recognize the cadence. The vocabulary, diminished capacity, community order, was Bryn's, just scrubbed with a committee's soap. Coordinated, Covington said. Create the narrative, unreliable, unsafe, then slide in with a protective solution that happens to transfer control. He tapped his pen twice. Decisive. We respond to the HOA formally and demand substantiation. We file the affidavit today. I'll send a cease and desist to any entity calling itself Northland Mortgage Services, LLC. And Lane, change your locks tonight. I pressed the heel of my hand to my sternum until the room steadied. The old fear, be nice, don't make trouble, rose like habit. I let it pass. There's a point where politeness becomes complicity, and that point was behind me now. When I left the office, the sky had the thin, pale blue of winter sun. I drove straight to the hardware store with a list Covington had written in his precise block letters. Deadbolt X2, strike plates, long screws, new keys. The bell over the door jingled like it had my whole life. By dusk, a bag of brass and steel sat on my passenger seat like a promise. Back in the kitchen, I brewed tea and set the HOA letter beside the Thanksgiving card. 2 pieces of paper that tried to define me. One as help, one as helpless. I slid both into a folder marked Evidence. The wind clawed at the old wooden frame, but the house held. So would I. If this is the battlefield you chose, I whispered into the quiet, then this is where I stand. Monday morning, I pushed open the door of Pete's Hardware, the little shop that smelled of oil and sawdust, the same place I'd gone for nails and paint back when Nate was small. Pete looked up from his newspaper, squinting before a grin spread across his face. Lane Whitaker? Haven't seen you in ages. I smiled faintly, steadier than I felt. I need deadbolts. Solid ones. He walked me down the aisle, pulling a brass set off the shelf. This one's sturdy, comes with 5 keys, enough for the people you trust most. He didn't mean anything by it, but the words hit sharp. Who did I trust? Myself, Covington. And maybe, if I dared hope, my 2 grandchildren. Nate? That was a question mark I couldn't circle yet. By afternoon, the clatter of a moving truck echoed against the porch. I watched as the crew carried out every piece Bryn had forced into this house. The glossy sectional that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby, the oversized dining table no one enjoyed sitting at, the high-backed chairs she said were proper for guests. Gone. all of it. I replaced them with things that felt like breathing again. A farmhouse table made from reclaimed wood, scarred and imperfect. A linen sofa in a soft shade of blue that invited you to curl up instead of sit stiff. A worn armchair tucked by the window where the light was best for reading. On the walls went the photos I'd packed away, my wedding day. Nate missing his front teeth, birthdays with sheet cakes and crooked candles. The house exhaled as if it had been waiting for me to bring it back to itself. While clearing a closet, I found a manila envelope jammed behind boxes. Inside was a storage unit contract from a facility on the edge of town. The Social Security number typed neatly at the top was mine. The signature scrawled across the bottom was Bryn's imitation of me. Slanted, sloppy, almost convincing. My stomach twisted. She wasn't just stealing, she was creating evidence. Someday she'd pull that file out and claim it proved I'd consented, that I'd willingly handed over my rights. I shoved the contract into my tote-marked evidence and carried it to the living room. There, taped to the fridge since Thanksgiving morning, was the 3-page checklist. Baseboards, closets, golf clubs. I fed each sheet into the fire. Flames curled Bryn's perfect lettering into black ash. "This roll you wrote for me," I whispered, watching the paper collapse inward. "It dies here." That evening, Covington stopped by, his briefcase stacked with folders. He set a sealed envelope on the table. "Affidavit, notarized and filed. Lane, don't just protect the house. Prepare to confront them." I nodded, already unscrewing panels from the smart thermostat. Every device Bryn had installed went into a cardboard box. Door sensors, indoor cameras, the sleek black hub that had once controlled my lights. Each piece I unplugged made me lighter. This wasn't her stage anymore. It was my home. Covington opened his laptop and rotated the screen toward me. "You should see this." My pulse spiked. On the screen was an email log he'd pulled, forwarded from Bryn to a real estate broker. Attached was a glossy photo of my Craftsman house, winter sun lighting the shingles. The caption below chilled me. "Soon to be ours. Clean title." The bile in my throat was sharp. They hadn't just planned to borrow against my house, they'd already started shopping it as if I were gone. Later that night, scrolling through IP data Covington's tech had traced, another truth landed. The anonymous complaint to the HOA, the one accusing me of wandering, of confusion, hadn't come from some neighbor. It had been sent on my own Wi-Fi from inside these walls. Bryn had sat here, legs crossed on my sofa, and typed me into incompetence. I closed my laptop, walked to the kitchen, and ground the beans of the expensive coffee I'd bought that afternoon. The aroma rose strong and dark, a small rebellion. I poured it steaming into my favorite mug, sat at the scarred wood table, and let the wind batter the old window panes. For the first time in years, this house felt unshakable, like it recognized me again. I lifted the cup and spoke softly into the empty room. "When they come back, the smell of this coffee will be waiting, and it will be the scent of freedom. Because no matter what keys they bring, none of them will open my door. Sunday, 10 a.m. I was sipping a cup of the dark roast Bryn once called pretentious, letting its warmth fill the kitchen, when the crunch of tires on gravel announced their return. Through the thin curtains, I saw the SUV nose into the drive, luggage piled to the roof, everyone climbing out stiff from the flight. Then came the sound, metal scraping metal. Keys jangled. The deadbolt resisted. A pause, another try, and another. Nate's voice carried through the door, tight with confusion. "This is weird. It won't turn. Why isn't it opening?" Bryn's tone sliced in, sharp and accusing. "You're using the wrong key." Don't tell me you're that careless. More rattling, louder this time, followed by fists pounding against the wood. I rose slowly, set my cup down, and walked to the door. When I cracked it open, faces filled the gap, Nate with sweat beading at his hairline, Bryn flushed with anger, Sophie and Cal drooping from travel fatigue, and Sarah lingering behind them, clutching a stuffed animal one of the kids had dropped. "Welcome home," I said evenly. "How was Cabo?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then Sophie tugged my sleeve, whispering, "Grandma, I really need the bathroom." I bent down, kissed her temple, and ushered her inside. Cal shuffled in after her, eyes half closed. When Bryn moved to follow, I placed my hand flat on the door frame and blocked her path. "This is my house," I said, voice calm but solid as the lock between us. "And I decide who comes through this door." Bryn blinked, thrown off by my tone, then forced a brittle laugh. "Don't be ridiculous, Lane. Move." Instead, I turned back into the dining room and laid the evidence out on the table one by one. The deed with my name printed in black ink, the cancellation letter forged from a fake email, the stack of bogus mortgage receipts, and finally, on my tablet, the Ring doorbell footage of Bryn sneaking off with a banker's box at 11:43 p.m., the night before Thanksgiving. The room seemed to still around us, even the hum of the refrigerator receding into silence. Bryn's face blanched, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Nate's eyes scanned each document, then snapped to his wife, disbelief splintering into horror. His lips trembled as he whispered, You did all this?" No one moved. The air was dense, charged, every breath dragging. The evidence between us was heavier than furniture, heavier than the walls themselves. For the first time in years, I felt the balance of power shift, not with shouting, not with force, but with the quiet weight of truth laid bare. Bryn's shriek ripped through the hallway. "You're senile, making this up out of thin air." Her voice cracked, but she forced it louder, as if volume could smother fact. I didn't raise mine. I steadied my breath. The document still spread across the table like a trial exhibit. "Family doesn't stand on forgery," I said, each word clipped, deliberate. "It doesn't build itself on lies." Before she could fire back, footsteps echoed from the kitchen. Covington appeared, calm as stone, his leather briefcase under one arm, a thick file in the other. He set it down with a weighty thud. "Forgery. Wire fraud. Elder abuse," he recited, flipping the cover open. "Every shred of this evidence has already been filed with the county attorney's office. This isn't just a family argument anymore. It's a criminal matter." The words sucked the heat out of the air. Nate's eyes stayed glued to the papers, moving from the deed to the forged cancellation, the video still of Bryn in the glow of the porch light. His jaw worked like he wanted to speak but couldn't. When his voice came, it was broken, almost childlike. "Mom, I kept quiet all these years to keep peace, but that silence, it's been killing you. And I let it." His eyes burned red as he swallowed hard, shame spilling across his face. Bryn spun to him, desperation etched in every line. She grabbed his arm with both hands. "Nate, you have to protect me. Tell her this doesn't matter. Tell her you're with me." For a moment, I saw him hesitate, the old habit of deferring, smoothing things over. Then he pulled free, voice ragged. "Protect you? You lied to me. To my kids. You tried to take my mother's home." He shook his head, hollow with disbelief. "You betrayed this family." Bryn's knees buckled. She collapsed against the doorframe, hair falling from its bun, makeup streaking down her cheeks. "This is her fault," she screamed, jabbing a finger at me. "She turned you against me." But no one moved to agree. The children huddled in the hallway, eyes wide, and even Sarah looked away, clutching the stuffed toy tighter. The only sound was the rustle of papers as Covington slid them back into his file. I looked at my son, not his wife. "If you want to walk back into this house," I said quietly, "you'll do it through the truth, not through silence, not through her lies. Through the truth, or not at all." The weight of my words hung heavy. Bryn's sobs filled the space, but no one listened anymore. The center of the room had shifted, and for once, it wasn't hers to command. 6 months later, life had taken on a rhythm that felt both new and achingly familiar. 3 mornings a week, I stood in front of a whiteboard at the public library, teaching a class called Protecting Yourself from Financial Fraud. The rows were filled with gray hair and sharp eyes, people leaning in as I explained how to spot forged emails, how to check your credit reports, how to say no without apology. In the afternoons, I joined the book club that met by the fireplace, losing myself in novels while snow melted outside the tall windows. Weekends belonged to Sophie and Cal. Saturday mornings. They barreled through my door with backpacks and messy hair, filling the house with the clatter of shoes and laughter. Sunday breakfasts became our tradition. Pancakes on the griddle, maple syrup dripping down plates, the scent of butter warming every room. Their chatter made the walls hum again. Nate showed up each Sunday too, quieter now, humbled. The divorce was final. Custody was his. He never came empty-handed. Without fail. He placed a bouquet of purple tulips on my counter, the flowers I'd loved since my husband first brought them home decades ago. He didn't always say the words, but the tulips were his apology, his gratitude, his promise not to forget where he'd come from. One bright spring morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window in thick, golden stripes. The air smelled of coffee and pancakes, the griddle still sizzling. Cal dragged cushions from the sofa, stacking them one on top of another until they wobbled like a fortress. He planted himself on top, arms stretched wide. "Grandma," he declared, with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can muster, "you're the queen of the castle." The words stopped me mid-step. For a moment, all I could do was laugh, the kind that rises straight from the chest, then pull him into my arms. Sophie clapped and joined in, crowning me with a pillow like it was a royal coronation. My eyes landed on the fireplace mantel, where the Thanksgiving card no longer sat. I had burned it months ago, its polished lettering reduced to ash. "Thank you for your service." What once humiliated me was nothing now, just smoke long gone from the chimney. I kissed the top of Cal's head and held both children close. I had taken back my house. But more than that, I had taken back myself. The walls, the rooms, the photographs on the shelves. They were no longer props in someone else's performance. They were mine, and they echoed with my voice again. I looked around the sunlit kitchen and thought, not with bitterness but with clarity, I was once thanked like a servant. Today, I thank myself for having the courage to say no.